Greetings. Welcome to week 3 of Principles of Property Management. A couple of housekeeping matters that I wanted to touch base with you about this week. It'll really help you if you have the textbook. If you don't have the textbook yet and you've ordered it a while ago and it's not coming for some reason, if you could let me know, that would be great, because I need to figure out why there aren't sufficient books at the bookstore for the class. That's something that's supposed to be arranged ahead of time, and I can do some checking on that for you if you're having a hard time getting your book. The other thing is that when you're going through the book and you're getting ready to take the quiz that's on the course, it will really help you if you review the chapter summary and do the little self-assessment quiz at the end of each chapter. Carefully review the questions and the answer key, because you'll be able to get some good ideas about what the chapter quiz will look like online, and that will be very helpful to you if you're not doing that already. You know, the discussion boards that I post are intended to be something to make you think a little bit. It may be that the information I'm looking for or that I'm asking you isn't right out of the book. I may want you to use some of your own personal experience to come up with your answers, or I may want you to take some of the information that's in the book and have you actually apply it to a particular set of facts. So it may be that I'm trying to make you think a little bit and not just recite back something that came out of the book, because I think you're smarter than that and I think you can do it. So when I ask you things, and even if you don't have the book and you're not sure you can just tell me what you think, or you can do a little independent research on your own, or whatever you would like to do. Just give you those little tips and little heads up. And finally, I see some people are not putting responses to discussion boards, and they're not posting to the other students' posts. Per the syllabus, you are supposed to provide at least 2 responses to other students' posts before the end of the assignment time. And I leave the discussion boards open so that you can do your initial post by a certain date in the week, and then you can go ahead and post your responses for a couple of days after that. I really need you to be doing that because I want you to at least somewhat engage with the other students in the class, and that's really the only way we have to do it, because we're not all sitting in the same room together. That's one of the challenges of an online course, is that we just don't get that robust discussion in class, where if somebody says something, it kind of sparks a comment or a thought that you might have, and we can kind of have that fun. So if you would please do that, that's going to be always a part of your grade, unless I say right in the discussion board that you don't have to respond for the case studies, for example. I did post assignment 1 this week, and it is due on the 15th. I don't want you to be terrified when you look at it, but it is a little bit of work, so I encourage you to get started on it soon, and don't wait until the last week, because you won't have time to get it done. I'm not giving you a case study this week because I want you to spend your time working on the assignment rather than writing up a case study, and so there'll be a little bit less work on this week's assignment, and then the same thing for next week. You won't have a case study either. But this is the first of 4 assignments, and it will involve a little bit of digging and a little bit of writing. For some people that's easier than others. I happen to enjoy writing, and it's not hard for me, but if it's something that's not your strong suit, and remember, grammar, spelling, and punctuation are important, I really need you to get going on that and make sure that you have some editing, and that you're following the instructions in the assignment. If you have any questions about anything in the assignment, please let me know right away so that you don't get held up on that. All right? Our Chapter 3 discussion this week has to do with the relationship between an owner and a property manager. This is, of course, critical for a number of reasons. If you're a property owner and you're thinking about hiring a property manager to hire or to manage your property for you, it gives you some ideas about what to look for in a good property manager. If you are the property manager and you're planning to work for someone else and manage someone else's property, this is an excellent chapter to give you a starting place for some things to look at so you can protect yourself legally and implement some good business practices for yourself. It's pretty tough. There's a lot of things out there that go into managing property for someone else. It's a little bit easier just to do it for yourself, and much more challenging if you're planning on starting your own business. Of course, it's always easier if you go to work for someone as an employee of a property management company, because that way you can get some training and there'll be fewer requirements in terms of establishing business entities and taking care of taxes and all that sort of thing. But there's quite a bit that goes into it. If you haven't ever done something like this, you may not have considered some of these things are important. But the chapter talks a lot about the contract between the owner and the property manager. And it also talks about a number of different kinds of business entities, or the kinds of ownership that a property owner might take. For example, a property owner could just be you or me, a single person, a sole proprietorship, or a married couple. Or there could be a formalized business entity like a corporation or a limited liability company that are filed with the Secretary of State and have some governing documents associated with them to tell how that entity will be run. There could be shareholders in a corporation, or multiple members with ownership interest in a limited liability company. There could be partnerships. There are a number of different forms these can take. Not only is property owned by these entities, and property owners may actually be a corporation rather than an actual person, but that's also something you can consider if you're going to start your own business as a property manager. Whether you would like to set up a corporation or an LLC or something for you to do your own business under. These are the kinds of things that are very complicated. If you don't have any experience with it, or even if you do, I always recommend consulting with professionals like a certified public accountant or an attorney to get some perspective and feedback on what might be the best way for you to go about setting up your own business, if that's something you're interested in doing. Even if you just own several properties, sometimes people set up corporations or limited liability companies or trusts to own those properties, and those have their own set of unique requirements as well. But sometimes people do that for asset protection purposes, or just because for tax purposes there are some advantages to doing that. So I encourage you, if you're thinking about owning property or managing property for someone else, a good first place to start is with an accountant, and I always recommend an attorney. I used to work in a law office for a lot of years. We did a lot of litigation work. A lot of the litigation work we saw could have been avoided if our clients had come to us at the beginning of the deal rather than waiting until the deal went south. I heard that many times from clients. I wish I had spent $1,000 and come to you, but I wanted to save that $1,000 on having these contracts drawn up. And now I've spent $50,000 on attorney's fees, and perhaps all of that could have been avoided. So that's just a word to the wise. I always recommend that consulting a professional is typically a good course of action, especially if you don't have any experience with some of the things that you're thinking about doing. Another good thing to remember is, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. If you don't have documentation of things in writing, you can never prove it if you do have to go to court. It's all going to be based on word of mouth and hearsay, and that typically is not strong evidence to support your case or your argument. The book says that it's a good idea to have your property management agreements in writing. I would go a step further, and I would say it's absolutely essential. If you don't have it in writing, you just have no ability to enforce your legal rights. And there is a lot more opportunity for people to have a misunderstanding about what the obligations are and the expectations. So much easier to have that all set forth in the beginning rather than having two people have two different ideas about how something is going to work out, and then having a conflict later because you really find out that you weren't on the same page all the way along, and by then it's really tough to get it fixed. So get it in writing and make sure you have it in writing. If you're planning to own property or manage property for someone else and have a property management agreement, again, I recommend that you avoid drafting your own agreement, although you can. One of your discussion boards this week talks about the plethora of free forms available on the internet and gives you the opportunity to take a look at a sample. There are just a multitude of things out there. Maybe they will work for you. But again, I'm very conservative and I'm risk averse. So I tend to go along with the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure approach, where I would rather have somebody look at it up front and then maybe I save myself some trouble later. But that's up to you. That's another one of the decisions you get to make as a business owner or a property owner. How are you going to handle that sort of thing? Are you going to feel comfortable doing it yourself? Of course, we never, ever write up agreements for other people to use unless we are an attorney, because then we are practicing law without a license if we do that. We're allowed to write up our own agreements, but we're not allowed to write up an agreement and give it to our family member or friend to use, because you can get in deep doo-doo that way. So just keep that in mind too. But the last thing I want to share with you today is that the book also talks about agency, and that a property manager can be an agent of the owner. What does that mean? It means that the property manager typically has the ability to act in the place of the owner, and that the acts of the property manager are deemed to be the acts of the property owner. So if you hire someone to manage a property for you and he goes out and does something really stupid, you might be stuck taking responsibility for that. Another good reason that you want to make sure that you're always dealing with someone reputable and that you have good paperwork in place to cover those eventualities. I know a couple of you in the class have either had a real estate license in the past or currently have a real estate license. And I just want to point out that you may recall from your pre-license classes that the law of agency pertaining to real estate agents is somewhat more limited than the general law of agency. We don't have fiduciary duties for real estate agents in Idaho, but if you're a property manager, you will have fiduciary duties. The book talks about what those are. They're a very high level duty, and there have been many a lawsuit filed over those duties when someone has felt that the property manager hasn't fulfilled those duties to the owner, such as obedience, loyalty, a duty of care, and putting someone else's interests above your own. And just wanted to point out that there are some differences for those of you who have a real estate license. You may have known that already, you may have learned that and may have forgotten, or maybe you didn't ever know it, but now you do. If you ever have any questions about that, please be sure to let me know. As you know, I have some knowledge with the real estate license law. And as a reminder, there is no requirement at this time to have a license of any kind to conduct property management activities for someone else for a fee. So you don't have to get any kind of special license or anything from the state to do that. All the more reason to make sure you have your ducks in a row before you enter into any contracts or that undertake property management activities. I hope this chapter will be helpful to you, whether you are an owner, whether you're considering buying investment property, whether you're considering going into property management. It's a good foundational chapter. It gives you a very broad overview of some of the things to look out for when you're considering these activities. I hope you have an awesome week, and I will look forward to hearing what you all have to say as part of your discussion boards and your discussion with each other. Thanks.